We all look forward to the day when science and religion shall walk hand in hand through the visible to the invisible. Science knows nothing of opinion, but recognizes a government of law whose principles are universal. Yet, any scientist who refuses to accept intangible values has no adequate basis for the values which he has already discovered. Revelation must keep faith with reason and religion with law, while intuition spreading its wings for greater flights, and science must justify faith in the invisible. To suppose that the creative intelligence of the universe would create man in bondage and leave him bound would be to dishonor the creative power which we call God. To suppose that God could make man as an individual without leaving him to discover himself would be to suppose an impossibility. Individuality must be spontaneous. It can never be automatic. The seed of freedom must be planted in the innermost being of man. But, like the prodigal son, man must make the great discovery for himself. We see abundance in the universe. We cannot count the grains of sand on a single beach. The earth contains untold riches, and the very air is vibrant with power. Why then is man weak, poor, and afraid? The divine plan is one of freedom. Bondage is not God ordained. Freedom is the birthright of every living soul. All instinctively feel this. The truth points to freedom under law. Thus, the inherent nature of man is forever seeking to express itself in terms of freedom. We do well to listen to this inner voice, for it tells us of a life wonderful in its scope, of a love beyond our fondest dreams, of a freedom which the soul craves. But the great love of the universe must be one with the great law of its own being, and we approach love through the law. This, then, is the teaching, love and law. As the love of God is perfect, so the law of God also is perfect. We must understand both. Whatever the nature of any principle may be, insofar as it is understood by anyone, it may be understood by all who take time to investigate. This does not require an unusual degree of intelligence, but rather a practical application of what we now know in order that we may increase our knowledge. The study of the science of mind is the study of first cause, spirit, mind, or that invisible essence, that ultimate stuff and intelligence from which everything comes, the power back of creation, the thing itself. We accept this thing and believe in it. What we desire is to know more about it and how to use it. From proof alone, we know we're dealing with a definite principle. If one, through the conscious use of his knowledge, can produce a certain result, we must know with what he is dealing. It may seem as though, in dealing with metaphysics, we're dealing with something that is too abstract. But what is tangible other than results? Principles are forever hidden from our eyes. We accept the deductions of science insofar as they are proved, and we recognize that they are built upon immutable but invisible principles. The universe never plays favorites. We are so used to the thought that if we mix certain colors, we get certain other colors, that we do not realize we're dealing with a principle. We know that whoever blends these particular colors will get the same result, but we do not know why. The wisest man living does not know why. We do not have to stretch any credulity anymore in metaphysics. We think of metaphysics perhaps as something that only the most profound thinkers have known about. But we should remember that we are also thinkers. The profound thought of all ages has stood in awe of life itself, realizing that there is a power and potentiality, the highest possibilities of which the human intellect cannot fathom. Universal principles are never respecters of persons. The universe has no favorites. Therefore it is written, and let him that is at thirst come, and whoever will, let him take the water of life freely. There is nothing supernatural about the study of life. Let us then approach the science of mind, the science of spiritual psychology, with awe, but not with fear, with truly a humble thought, but not with a sense that we are unworthy. Let us approach it normally, happily, willing to accept, glad to experiment, hoping and believing that as the result of our efforts, we should each derive a great good, a sound understanding of the natural laws of life as they apply to the individual and his relationship to the whole universal scheme of things. This is the simple meaning of true metaphysical teaching, the study of life and the nature of the law, governed and directed by thought, always conscious that we live in a spiritual universe, that God is in, through, around, and for us. There is nothing supernatural about the study of life from a metaphysical viewpoint. That which today seems to us supernatural, after it is thoroughly understood, will be found spontaneously natural. We all know that many have been healed of physical disease through prayer. Let us analyze this. Why are some healed through prayer while others are not? Can we believe that there is a God who picks out some man and says, I will honor your prayer, but I do not think so much of Mr. So-and-so? It is superstitious to believe that God will answer the prayer of one above another. Jesus said that God maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. Since some people have been healed through prayer, while others have not, the answer is not that God has responded to some and not to others, but that some have responded to God more than others. The prayer that thought has responded by corresponding. The answer to prayer is in the prayer. But what is a prayer? A prayer is a movement of thought within the mind of the one praying, along a definite line of meditation, that is, for a specific purpose. What is the mind? No man living knows. We know a great deal about the mind, but not what it is. By mind, we mean consciousness. We are now using it. We cannot locate mind in the body, for while the body is a necessary vehicle for consciousness, while we are here, it is not consciousness. We cannot isolate mind. All we know that it is not what it is, but what it does. And the greatest philosopher who ever lived knows no more than this, except that he may tell us more of how it works. Mind, the thing, spirit, causation, is beyond, and yet not beyond our grasp. Beyond, in that it is so big. Within, in that wherever we grasp at it, we are it to the extent that we grasp it. But since it is infinite, we can never encompass it. We shall never encompass God, and yet we shall always be in God and of God. Mind comes under two classifications. There are not two minds, but rather two names employed in describing states of consciousness: the objective or conscious, and the subjective or unconscious. We think of the conscious state as our conscious use of mind. The subconscious or subjective state of mind, sometimes called the unconscious state, is that part of mind which is set in motion as a creative thing by the conscious state. In the subjective mind of man, we find Allah obeying His word, the servant of His spirit. Suggestion has proved that the subconscious mind acts upon our thoughts. It is the mental law of our being and the creative factor within us. It is unnecessary at this point to go into all the details of the subjective mind and its mode of action. It is not enough to say that within us is a mental law working out the will and purposes of our conscious thoughts. This can be no other than our individual use of that greater subjective mind, which is the seat of all mental law and action, and is the servant of the eternal spirit throughout the ages. Marvelous as the concept may be, it is none the less true that man has at his disposal, in what he calls his subjective mind, a power that seems to be limitless. This is because he is one with the whole on the subjective side of life. Man's thought, falling into his subjective mind, merges with the universal subjective mind and becomes the law of his life through the one great law of all life. There are not two subjective minds. There is but one subjective mind, and what we call our subjective mind is really the use we are making of the one law. Each individual maintains his identity in law through his personal use of it, and each is drawn from life what he thinks into it. To learn how to think is to learn how to live, for our thoughts go into a medium that is infinite in its ability to do and to be. Man, by thinking, can bring into his experience whatsoever he desires. If he thinks correctly and becomes a living embodiment of his thoughts. This is not done by holding thoughts, but by knowing the truth. Within us, then, there is a creative field, which we call the subjective mind. Around us, there is a creative field, which we call subjective. One is universal, and the other is individual. But in reality, they are one. There is one mental law in the universe, and where we use it, it becomes our law because we have individualized it. It is impossible to plumb the depths of the individual mind, because the individual mind is really not individual, but is individualized. Behind the individual is the universal, which has no limits. In this concept alone lies the possibility of eternal and endless expansion. Everyone is universal on the subjective side of life, and individual only at the point of conscious perception. The riddle is solved, and we all use the creative power of the universal mind every time we use our own mind. All thought is creative. Since this is true, it follows that we cannot say that one thought is creative while another is not. we must say that all thought is creative, according to the nature, impulse, emotion, or conviction behind the thought. Thought creates a mold in the subjective in which the idea is accepted and poured, and sets power in motion in accordance with the thought. Ignorance of this excuses no one from its effects, for we are dealing with law and not with whimsical fancy. The conscious mind is superior to the subjective and may consciously use it. Great as the subconscious is, its tendency is set in motion by the conscious thought. And in this possibility lies the path to freedom. The karmic law is not kismet. It is not fate, but cause and effect. It is a taskmaster to the unwise, a servant to the wise. Experience has taught us that the subjective tendency of this intelligent law of creative force may consciously be directed and definitely used. This is the greatest discovery of all time. There is no mystery here, but a profound fact and demonstrable one. The road to freedom lies not through mysteries or occult performances, but through the intelligent use of nature's forces and laws. The law of mind is a natural law in the spiritual world. But what do we mean by the spiritual world? We mean the world of conscious intelligence. The subjective is a world of law and of mechanical order. In our lives, it is largely a reaction, an effect, a way. It is never a person, though it often appears to act as though it were one. Right here, many are completely misled, mistaking subjective impulses for actual personalities. This, however, is a field of investigation not fully to be considered here. The simplest way to state the proposition is to say that we have a conscious mind that operates within a subjective field, which is creative. The conscious mind is spirit. The subjective mind is law. One is a complement of the other, and no real individuality could be expressed without a combination of both. No man has ever plumbed the depths of either the conscious or the subjective life. In both directions, we reach out to infinity. And since we cannot encompass infinity, we shall always be expanding and always enlarging our capacity to know and to experience. We need not ask why these things are so. There can be no reason given as to why the truth is true. We do not create laws and principles, but discover and make use of them. Let us accept this position relative to the laws of mind and spirit, and see what can be done with them, rather than how we may contradict the inevitable. Our mind and spirit is our echo of the eternal thing itself. And the sooner we discover this fact, the sooner we shall be made free and happy. The universe is filled with spirit and filled with law. One reacts to the other. We are spirit and we are law. The law of our life reacts to our spiritual or material concepts and builds and rebuilds according to our beliefs and faith. Learning to trust will make us happy. All men seek some relationship to the universal mind, the oversoul, or the eternal spirit, which we call God. And life reveals itself to whoever is receptive to it. That we are living in a spiritual universe which includes the material or physical universe has been a conclusion of the deepest thinkers of every age. That this spiritual universe must be one of pure intelligence and perfect life, dominated by love, by reason, and by the power to create, seems an inevitable conclusion. There is a power in the universe that honors our faith in it. There is a law in the universe which exacts the uttermost farthing. We all wish to feel that the power behind everything is good as well as creative. An eternal and changeless intelligence in which man lives and moves and has his being. Intuitively, we sense that every man in his native state is some part or manifestation of this eternal principle, and that the entire problem of limitation, evil, suffering, and uncertainty is not God ordained, but is the result of ignorance. It has been written that the truth shall make us free, provided we know the truth, and we note that the evolution of man's consciousness brings with it the acquisition of new powers and higher possibilities. We find ourselves torn by confusion, by conflict, by affirmation and denial, by emotion congested by fear, congealed by pride. We are afraid of the universe in which we live, suspicious of people around us, uncertain of the salvation of our own souls. All these things negatively react and cause physical disorders. Nature seems to await our comprehension of her, and since she is governed by immutable laws, the ignorance of which excuses no man from their effects, the bondage of humanity must be the result of our ignorance of the true nature of reality. The storehouse of nature may be filled with good, but this good is locked to the ignorant. The key to this door is held in the mind of intelligence, working in accordance with universal law. Through experience, man learns what is really good and satisfying, what is truly worthwhile. As his intelligence increases and his capacity to understand the subtle law of nature grows, he will gradually be set free. As he learns the truth will automatically free him. When we learn to trust the universe, we shall be happy, prosperous, and well. We must learn to come under that divine government and accept the fact that nature's table is ever filled. Never was there a cosmic famine. The finite alone has wrought and suffered. The infinite lies stretched in smiling repose. God is always good, no matter what our emotional storm or what our objective situation may be. There is always something hidden in the inner being that has never been violated. We may stumble, but always there is that eternal voice, forever whispering within our ear, that thing which causes the eternal quest, that thing which forever sings and sings. This is the thing itself. There is that within every individual which partakes of the nature of the universal wholeness, and in so far as it operates, is God. That is the meaning of the word Emmanuel, the meaning of the word Christ. There is that within us which partakes of the nature of the divine being, and since it partakes of the nature of the divine being, we are divine. It reacts to us according to our belief in it, and it is an immutable law, subject to the use of the least among us, no respecter of persons. It cannot be bound. Our soul will never change or violate its own nature. All the denying of it will never change it. All the affirming of it will never make it any more than it is. But since it is what it is, and works in the way that it works, it appears to each through his belief. It is done unto each one of us as we believe. We will say then that in spirit, man is one with God. But what of the great law of the universe? If we are really one with the whole, we must be one with the law of the whole, as well as one with the spirit of the whole. If we try to find something difficult to grasp, then we shall never grasp it, because we shall always think of it as being incomprehensible. The mind which we discover within us is a mind that governs everything. This is the thing itself, and we should recognize its simplicity. The science of mind is not a special revelation of any individual. It is rather the culmination of all revelations. We take the good wherever we find it, making it our own insofar as we understand it. The realization that good is universal, and that as much good as any individual is able to incorporate in his life is his to use, is what constitutes the science of mind and spirit. We have discussed the nature of the thing as being universal energy, mind, intelligence, spirit, finding conscious and individualized centers of expression through us, and that man's intelligence is this universal mind, functioning at the level of man's concept of it. This is the essence of the whole teaching. There is a universal mind, spirit, intelligence, that is the origin of everything. It is first cause. It is God. This universal life and energy finds an outlet in and through all that is energized, and through everything that lives. There is one life back of everything that lives. There is one energy back of all that is energized. This energy is in everything. There is one spirit back of all expression. That is the meaning of that mystical saying, in him we live and move and have our being. Our thought and emotion is the use we make consciously or unconsciously of this original creative thing that is the cause of everything. Therefore, we shall say that the mind, spirit, and intelligence which we find in ourselves is as much of this original creative God as we understand. That this is not robbing God is a self-evident fact. Since we are, then we are real and actual and have existence. And since we can reduce all this to a fundamental unit, we find that we have this proposition. There is spirit, or this invisible cause, and nothing out of which all things are to be made. Now spirit plus nothing leaves spirit only. Hence, there is one original cause, and nothing out of which we are made. In other words, we are made from this thing. That is why we are called the Son of God. We know now that this is what we are, because we could not be anything else. But we do not know how much of this we are. When we see it as it is, then we shall see ourselves as we are. We can only see it by looking at it through our own eyes. Hence, we shall find a better God when we shall arrive at a higher standard for man. If God is to interpret himself to man, he must interpret himself through man. And the Spirit can make no gift that we do not accept. This original life is infinite. It is good. It is filled with peace. It is of the essence of purity. It is the ultimate of intelligence. It is power. It is law. It is life. It is in us, in that inner sanctuary of our own nature, hidden perhaps from objective gaze, nestles the seed, perfection. In our ignorance of the truth, we have misused the highest power we possess. And so great is this power, so complete is our freedom in it, so absolute the domain of law through it, that the misuse of this power has brought upon us the very conditions from which we suffer. We are bound because we are first free. The power which appears to bind us is the only power in the universe which can free us. This is why Jesus summed up his whole philosophy in this simple statement: "It is done unto you as you believe." The great teacher looked so deeply into nature that she revealed her fundamental simplicity to him. That believe and that as symbolize heaven and hell. And so we suffer, not because suffering is imposed upon us, but because we are ignorant of our true nature. The thing then works for us by working through us, and is us, always. It cannot work for us in any other way. It spreads itself over the whole universe and shouts at us from every angle. But it can become power to us only when we recognize it as power. We cannot recognize that it is while we are believing that it is not. We may enter in because of our belief, but we cannot enter while there is unbelief. Here we come to a house divided against itself. If we say we can only experience a little good, then we shall experience but a little good. But if we say there is no great and no small to the soul that maketh all, then we may experience a greater good because we have conceived it. Therefore, our belief sets the limit to our demonstration of a principle which, of itself, is without limit. It is ready to fill everything because it is infinite. So, it is not a question of its willingness nor of its ability. It is entirely a question of our own receptivity. That we must go the way of the law is a fundamental tenet of this science because nature obeys us as we first obey it, and our obedience to it is of our acceptance of it. How much can we believe? As much as we can believe will be done unto us. When the consciousness speaks, the law receives and executes. When a farmer plants a seed, he invokes the law. That which follows is done by the mechanical side of nature, which has no volition of its own. Involution is the cause, and evolution is the effect. When a practitioner thinks, or gives a treatment, or makes a prayer, he is dealing with involution, the first step of the creative order. This is what the Bible calls the Word. That which follows is evolution, or the unfoldment of the Word, or concept, into objective existence. We are thinking, willing, knowing, conscious centers of life. We are surrounded by, immersed in, and there is flowing through us a creative something. Call it what you will. The sum total of all our thought, will, purpose, and belief creates a tendency in this law that causes it to react to us according to the sum total of that belief. Ignorance of the law excuses no one from its effects. If then certain specific ways of thought and belief have produced limitations, other beliefs will change them. We must learn to believe. The approach should be direct and it should be specific. Suppose one is laboring under the idea of limitation. His whole thought is a picture of limitation. Where is he placing himself in mind? Is he not in substance saying, I cannot have and enjoy good things? And he is demonstrating that he cannot have or accomplish good. It may take time to reshape the basis of his thought. He must commence by saying, I perceive that because I am what I am, because of this infinite thing that overshadows eternity and finds its abiding place in me, I know that good is now mine, all good. There is no mental coercion in this. We do not will things to be done. Things are brought into being not by will, but by the power of the self-assertive truth. How much can one demonstrate? Just what one can believe. How much can we see? How much can we accept? How much can we find in our consciousness that is no longer repudiated by our own denials? Whatever that is, that much we can have. The gardener goes forth in faith to sow his seeds. He has learned that as he sows, so shall he reap. The law works for all alike. We must accustom ourselves to the concept of the impersonalness of the law, the availability of the law, and the mechanical accuracy of the law. If we can conceive only a little good, that is as much as we can experience. We must instill into the mind the fundamental proposition that good is without bonds. Only good and loving kindness shall follow me all the days of my life. We must get this concept rather than continue to think that there is a power of evil as opposed to the power of good. We experience good and evil because we perceive a presence of duality rather than unity. Then, knowing that the thing can work for us only through us, let us begin to accept today more good than we experienced yesterday, and to know that we shall reap a harvest of fulfilled desires. The time must come when we shall have left the apparent evil behind, when it shall be rolled up like a scroll and numbered with the things which were once thought to be. Let us realize and work with this sound knowledge and perfect faith, that as high as we shall make our mark in mind and spirit, so high shall be its outward manifestation in our material world. We should approach the study of this science rationally, never expecting to derive any benefits from it that its principle does not contain. For while it is true that we are immersed in an infinite intelligence, a mind that knows all things, it is also true that this intelligence can acquaint us with its ideas only as we are able and willing to receive them. The divine mind is infinite. It contains all knowledge and wisdom, but before it can reveal its secrets, it must have an outlet. This outlet we shall be compelled to supply through our own receptive mentalities. All invention, art, literature, government, law, and wisdom that has come to the race has been given to it through those who have deeply penetrated the secrets of nature and the mind of God. Perhaps the simplest way to state the proposition is to say that we are surrounded by a mind or intelligence that knows everything, that the potential knowledge of all things exists in this mind, that the abstract essence of beauty, truth, and wisdom coexists in the mind of the universe, that we also exist in it and may draw from it. But what we draw from it, we must draw through the channel of our own minds. A unity must be established, and a conscious connection must be made before we can derive the benefits which the greater mind is willing to reveal or impart to us. The Spirit can give us only what we can take. It imparts of itself only as we partake of its nature. It can tell us only what we can understand. The infinite knowingness becomes our wisdom only in such a degree as we embody its intelligence. It has been said that we can know God only insofar as we can become God. This is a far-reaching thought and should be carefully scrutinized. It is to be taken figuratively and not too literally, for we cannot really become God, but we can and do partake of the divine nature, and the universal does personify itself through man in varying degrees, according to man's receptivity to it. The universe is impersonal. It gives alike to all. It is no respecter of persons. It values each alike. Its nature is to impart, ours to receive. When we stand in the light, we cast a shadow across a pathway of our own experience. It is beautiful and true thought to realize that every man stands in the shadow of a mighty mind, a pure intelligence, and divine givingness. Not alone under the great comes the soft tread of the unseen guest. The arrogant have not perceived the simplicity of faith, but the pure in heart see God. The farmer has seen the heavenly hosts in his fields. The child has frolicked with him at play. The mother has clasped him to her breast, and the fond lover has seen him in the eyes of his beloved. We look too far away for reality. The intelligence by and through which we perceive that there is a spiritual presence and an infinite mind in the universe constitute our receptivity to it, and decides its flow through us. We have made a riddle out of simplicity. Therefore, we have not read the sermons written in stones, nor interpreted the light of love running through life. To return to a sane simplicity is one of the first things and most important things to do. All men receive some light, and this light is always the same light. There is one nature diffused throughout all nature, one God incarnated in all peoples. The divine incarnation is inherent in our nature. We are immersed in an infinite knowingness. The question is, how much of this reality are we going to express in our own lives? The direct approach is always the best and the most effective. Insofar as any man has spoken the truth, he has proclaimed God. It matters not what his particular approach may have been. The scientist and the philosopher, the priest and the professor, the humanitarian and the empire builder, all have caught some gleam of the eternal glory, and each has spoken in his own tongue, a language which is of itself universal. Let us do away with the ponderosity of thought and approach the things simply and quietly. It is the nature of the universe to give us what we are able to take. It cannot give us more. It has given all. We have not yet accepted the greater gift. Spiritual wisdom says that God manifests through everything and is incarnated in all men. That all is divinity, and that nature herself is the body of God. The mechanical laws of nature are set and immutable, but the spontaneous recognition of these laws gives us the power to bring them into practical use in everyday life and experience. Here we have a dual unity, law and order, spontaneous choice, volition, conscious action, and automatic reaction. The laws of the universe are to be trusted, but we must come to understand them before we can use them. Once understood, any law is available and is impersonally responsive to each and all alike. In an intelligent study of the teachings of the science of mind, we come to understand that all is love, and yet all is law. Love rules through law. Love is the divine givingness. Love is the way. Love is spontaneous. Love is impersonal. We should study the nature of reality with this in mind. And in this way we shall avoid two grave mistakes, either viewing life as made up only of mechanical laws, or viewing it as made up only of spontaneous actions, irrespective of law and order. As we gain the broader viewpoint, we shall see that life must contain two fundamental characteristics. We shall see that there is an infinite spirit operating through an infinite and immutable law. In this cosmos, and not chaos, finds an eternal existence in reality. Love points the way, and the law makes the way possible. If we observe any scientific discovery, we shall see that this is the way it works. Some man minds discover the law or principle governing the science. This is the way of love, of personal volition, of choice. This is a spontaneous element in the universe. Following this knowledge of the way the principle works, having discovered the operation of the law, the spontaneous element now rests its case on immutable reactions inherent in the law. All science is based upon proven principles. But we should not overlook the significant fact that it is the mind which discovered and makes use of mechanical law. Is not this mind the spirit in us? We can never completely fathom the infinite mind. We shall always be discovering new lands. Consequently, evolution is an eternal unfoldment of the more yet to be. Since it is the mind which must first come to see, know, and understand, and since all future possibility for the race must find an avenue of outlet through someone's mind, we shall do well to look to the mind for the answer to all our problems. Undoubtedly, we are surrounded by and immersed in a perfect life, a complete, normal, happy, sane, harmonious, and peaceful existence. But only as much of this life as we embody will really become ours to use. As much of this life as we understand and embody will react as immutable law. the reaction of the mechanical to the volitional. The concept is wonderful and fraught with tremendous significance. In it is bound up our hopes and fears, our expectations and our future and present realizations. Since an understanding of any law must first pass through our conscious mind before we can make use of it, it follows that with all our getting, we should get understanding. Should we wish to know a certain truth, we should state that this truth is already known in mind, and this statement will be true. But the overmind must be accepted into our mind before we can understand it. How then are we to accomplish the desired result? By stating and feeling that our mind knows the truth about the thing we desire to know. In this way, we drag the infinite mind into our mentalities for definite knowledge of some particular good.